Now, here's a key thing to understand. Adrenaline, epinephrine, does not cross the blood-brain barrier. So the adrenaline from our adrenals doesn't actually get into the brain to stimulate elevated levels of alertness. Rather, it acts on receptors on the vagus nerve. Again, the vagus nerve communicates with the brain, and also in the vagus nerve, certain brain areas communicate with the body. So adrenaline has a lot of effects within the body, but when it's released, it also acts on so-called adrenergic receptors on the vagus nerve. Then the vagus nerve is activated in a way that stimulates the activity of a brain area, because remember, the vagus goes from the body into the brain, stimulates the so-called NST, and because neuroanatomists like to argue about naming, sometimes it'll also be called the NTS, the nucleus of the solitary tract, or the nucleus tractus solitarius. Super annoying, I know. Forget the acronym unless you want to know that it's sometimes NST and sometimes it's NTS. Don't ask me why neuroanatomists do this. In any case, the NST can then communicate with a really important brain area whose name you should remember, which is the locus coeruleus. The locus coeruleus contains neurons that release, among other things, norepinephrine, which is similar in action to epinephrine, but different. Neurons in the locus coeruleus send those little wires that we call axons into the brain in a very widespread manner. It's almost as if they're positioned to sprinkler the brain with a neurochemical, and that neurochemical is norepinephrine. They also have the capacity to release other neurochemicals, but right now we're concentrating on norepinephrine. When norepinephrine is released from the locus coeruleus, it has this tendency to elevate the levels of activity in other brain areas through this sort of sprinklering-like mechanism. What that means is that other areas of the brain, such as your prefrontal cortex, such as your hippocampus, such as different areas of the hypothalamus, and indeed lots of brain circuits, all have a greater capacity to be engaged. This is what we're talking about when we talk about autonomic arousal. Release of adrenaline from the adrenals that has action within the body, elevated heart rate, blood pressure, etc. And then adrenaline also from the adrenals to the vagus, from the vagus to the NST, NST to locus coeruleus, and then locus coeruleus sprinklers the brain with this norepinephrine, raising the levels of baseline activity in all those brain areas and making them more likely to be engaged by things that we're trying to attend to, more likely to engage, say, the neurons of the prefrontal cortex that can learn context-dependent strategy switching, such as in a Stroop task, or when we're trying to attend to information and we go, okay, here's something important, I need to pay attention to this. We're able to do that because of that elevated level of norepinephrine. It facilitates, it's permissive for elevating our levels of attention and focus.